Saying that, I suppose this is a music podcast. Probably shouldn't go down the movie route, or we'll be here.
Oh, we'll be here for ages. Like,
Watched Terminator 2 not that long ago. T-1000.
liquid metal. Ugh,
Do you know
genius.
Yeah,
It's
and
fucking
I
genius.
never
Saw it in 4K in cinemas. Good release of it. Like, it still stands up. The newest bloody Terminator movie that came out looked worse than Terminator 2.
I suppose this is a music podcast, so
The Shining,
Terminator 2.
films, sequels, Back to the Future, Terminator 2, Aliens,
Dylan! You son of a bitch.
horror film fan, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, likes The Exorcist, Halloween.
It was called Halloween Ends, and it ended all of my interest in that
Yes.
franchise. The first one was great. Second one was like, and then the third one, I was like, you throw shit at a wall and just sit
Yeah,
on a stick.
well-
Like, wait, hang on, this is a music podcast. I
Yeah.
forgot all about that.
We literally started this segue by saying we won't get distracted talking
Yeah.
about horror films, and here we are.
And it's exactly where we ended up.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just jump in, man.
Let's do it.
So it's the second one for me, so this is exciting. So first, thanks for coming.
Oh,
Like-
thank you so much. I was stoked. This is so humbling that someone cares to hear my story.
No, man. Well, honestly, I've known you for a little while now, so it's nice to actually be able to sit down and talk about something that's not the work that we're at.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think I was telling someone at work actually that we had this interview, and I was like, come to think of it, I think Pace was like the first person I spoke to at work who like just didn't talk to me about work. So I think we were talking about like what we did at uni and stuff, and we we're
Yeah.
talking about film and scoring and stuff, and we started like talking about our shared love of The Shining.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
yeah.
funny. I remember that day. That was like my first day. I worked there, and yeah.
That seems
That's
to be a common thread.
Right.
Yeah, because I was talking to the boys. We did one on Wednesday with Depuration, and we ended up like going straight down the rabbit hole about Terminator 2.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh wait, hang on, this is a music podcast.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that.
Oh, look, man, films like sequels are so lackluster these days. I feel like they got it
Mm.
right in the 80s. Like you had Back to the Future sequel, you had Terminator 2, you had like well, Terminator 2 was in the 80s, but like Aliens, you know?
Yeah, there was this weird thing where the second one was better than the first,
Mm,
and now
mm.
it's like you rebooting it and making it worse than it was.
Yeah.
And you've had
yeah.
like 30 years to get it right, and somehow it's significantly worse. I don't
Well,
know.
I'm a massive like OG horror film fan, so like, you know, Halloween, Alien, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like a lot of those 70s
Yeah.
films, The Exorcist, and I was super stoked when they were doing the like new trilogy of Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like direct sequel to like, you know,
Yeah.
John Carpenter's OG film. And it was so sick. And then I saw the third one of the movies that sort of closed out that new trilogy, and it left a lot to be desired.
Don't get me started on that, because it was called Halloween Ends, and it ended all of my interest in that franchise.
Yes, absolutely.
So, it was annoying too, because the first one was great. Like, and the second one was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, it has that like middle movie itis thing where it's like never quite as good.
Yeah.
And then the third one, I was like, yeah, you just throw shit at a wall and just sit on
Yeah,
a stick.
well,
Like,
Like the second half of the second film was just everyone chanting like this ends tonight, like
Yeah,
evil dies tonight. Then they made a third one. It's like
oh, it's awful.
we literally started this segue by saying we won't get distracted talking
Yeah.
about horror films, and here
And-
we are.
And it's exactly where we ended up.
Yeah.
So I suppose to segue back into music, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure.
Let us know what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, so my name's Dylan. I go by the name Amity. I'm a North Brisbane-based hip-hop artist. I rap, I produce, and yeah, been doing this for probably since about 2010, but I guess properly since about 2014. So yeah,
And you also dabble in the writing as well, so you're a journalist.
I do.
for
Yeah,
AU
so I'm a
Review.
music journalist, and I write a bit of poetry, and yeah, writing's kind of always been my thing. So kind of just was I guess a natural gravitation towards hip hop for me. That's a very obviously lyric based,
Mm.
sort of lyric focused style of music.
Yeah, there's one thing I will say about hip hop and rap in general is there's like this really incredible capacity to talk about something very topical.
Mm,
I was listening to an Eminem song. I don't know what it was. It just came on,
yeah.
and it's a pretty popular one. I just wish I could remember what it was. And in the middle, he starts talking about how someone like was mean to him at like a music awards or something. And I
Right,
was like, you
okay.
could never do that in any other genre of music.
Yeah.
You don't have that direct capacity to put a message out
Yeah.
that directly. So
How many genres of music have diss tracks?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
where you can create beef that like, other artists get behind and the whole world kind of watches.
Yeah, and it's also like a cultural phenomenon. Like
Yeah.
where that music goes is where like people
Mm.
go, which is really interesting.
It's very socio-political for sure.
Like I don't know if this is true, and I'm not gonna make you the rap historian, but from what I understand, hip hop started as like street, like protest music sort of thing. Like they used to do it in the street, and it was like almost like protest
Yeah.
chants and stuff like that.
I remember reading when I was like first getting into hip hop and sort of really delving deep into the research side of things that it began from like people from the Caribbean coming over to America and kind of introducing essentially freestyle and sort of the meter in their words, like the rhythms and everything, as opposed to just singing. And like, don't quote me on this, but I think it would have started in New York.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that sounds about right.
yeah. So it's yeah, and I mean, you've got a lot of different influences in hip hop as well, from the production side of things to what kind of samples or sounds are used in the beats, as well as I
Mhm.
guess the delivery and you've got like people that will have really gospel kind of influences and soul influences. You've got the whole West Coast 90s 2000s phenomenon with like funk kind
Mhm.
of influence, bass lines, stuff like that.
The Snoop Dogg
Um,
stuff that was like really like
yeah,
funky, sort of like
yeah,
sounds like the San
yeah.
Andreas soundtrack kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so there's a lot of different avenues that kind of like poured into this melting pot to create what it is today. And then obviously it went through so many generational shifts, depending obviously like what continent it came out of as well.
Mhm.
Like, we had like, I guess in more recently, you had grime come out of the UK.
Yep.
You've got like even in America, like West Coast, East Coast, Dirty South, like they're all so different from each other stylistically as well. And then over here, like in the last kind of 5 years or so, we've seen a resurgence in drill,
Mhm.
which is kind of like, I guess, a more, that more aggressive kind of hyped up version of trap. So
Yeah,
there's
and
so many evolutions.
drill was like a UK thing, right? Like it originated in the UK, but it's now sort of like a big Polynesian sort
Yeah,
of like thing
yeah.
here.
From what I
Yeah.
understand, I'm not like too heavily into that, but from what I've gathered, that's like the vibe I get. Grime was more so like, you'd have like a dubstep almost like electronic beat at like 240 BPM with like these double time flows over like halftime snares. So that was kind of like their thing. And then I guess you had like the 90s boom bap, which was kind of a big factor in influencing local hip hop. Like
Mhm.
when I first got into local hip hop, I was listening to all the big names like Hilltop Hoods and Bliss and SO, Illy, Horror Show Draft, all those guys where it's just like your real simple kind of like, they'll have like a funky bass line with some brass, maybe some like, electric guitar, and then it's just your classic hard hitting kick and snare kind of stuff. Whereas, um, yeah, like it's just interesting to see like different places and different times, sort of how it all comes together. And
Mm.
nowadays, we're really fortunate where we can kind of like just pluck sort of a little element from each style and kind of make it your own, which is really cool. And it's also hip hop or like rap, I guess, is also permeating mainstream like commercial music a lot more as well. And
It
we've got
is the
crossovers
mainstream
now
now,
with
yeah.
like country and stuff as well.
Yeah, they
Like Lil
actually
Nas
have
X.
they have like a very similar amount of production, like in the
Mm,
sound of them now too. Like
yeah.
country, I'm sort of listening to, and I'm like, that is almost hip hop.
Yeah, you've
Like,
got like the sort of the programming through there, the rolling hi-hats.
yeah,
Yeah, the 808s for
yeah.
sure.
I remember having this conversation with a girl at work once because she said she loves country music and she was playing it, and I said like, what about this is country though? And
Mm,
she's like, oh, it's like his voice, and I was like, yeah, if you
it's
took
got
that
a
out.
twang.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if his voice, if it was just like, there's no like, old school like pedal steel playing or like
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, if you took all that out, it would either be a rock song
Mm,
or it sounds literally like a pop or
just
hip
pop.
hop song. Like it's
Yeah.
just like the background is just like none of that is like,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
cowboy hats in that
Yeah,
in
for
that sound. I
sure.
don't hear that.
It's like it used to be like taboo to say you like country. And
Yeah, what's going on?
like me, I don't listen to country personally, but I can appreciate the like musicianship of
Mm,
it and the history of it as well. Um, and there's like, yeah, like you were just saying, I guess there's so much country flavor in contemporary music that you would even hear on like top 40 radio stations
yeah.
that, for people these days to say that they're not even at least open to country style music. Like it's kind of like it's already there. It's already here.
There used to be that distinction when you would talk to people, and it would always be
Yeah.
one person likes the other and hates the other. And it was kind of like a triangle of things that people don't like.
Yeah.
And it was like, I will listen to anything except country, rap, or heavy metal. And
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
always those as like the outlier of what you preferred if you liked the other two or something.
I also heard opera thrown in sometimes, but it's interesting because I've heard a lot of metal vocalists, at least those that scream, have like opera vocal lessons, like to
Yeah,
start
right.
out to do with like opening the throat and stuff. So it all comes down to, and like metal, I guess stylistically, a lot of metal music has classical influence. So there's so many
Yeah, yeah.
overlapping features, but
From a guitar perspective, if you listen
Mm.
to metal, it is heavily inspired by violins. Like
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
sweeping was because people were trying to get that like
Right.
that sound that you would get from sweeping violins.
Mm.
And it's heavily inspired by like classical theory.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where you, like, it's funny if you just distort it, it sounds like metal
Right.
music, but then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you kind of listen to it, you're like, oh, it's Vivaldi.
I
Oh.
I am a sucker for strings. One of my favorite albums of all time is the S&M Live album from
Oh.
Metallica.
So good.
And yeah, man, you just put strings in anything, like any acoustic track that's got like a
Yeah.
string section, just gets you right in the feels. It's moving stuff.
Who was it? The metal band that just, I can't believe, Bring Me the Horizon. They did
Mm.
one as well at the Albert Hall, I think, as well.
Was that Architects?
Is it Architects?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't
Architects
remember.
did one like this year, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was fantastic. Like
Yeah.
hearing that genre,
Mm.
like, I mean, thrash, it sort of lends itself to it in some ways from a musical perspective. Like
Yeah.
that sounds ridiculous when you hear it out of context, but when you break it down, it's there. But I always,
Classical can be fast, man. Like
Yeah.
they're similar in some ways. Yeah.
yeah. I guess one of the things I'd like to ask you is, being that there is so many genres and things like that. What was it, or what sound or person or type of hip hop was it that made you go like, oh, this is it for me. Like this is my thing.
Hip hop specifically came from my mom in terms of like my first exposure. I remember being a young kid, probably younger than I should have been, and my mom playing the Eminem show
Yeah.
around me. So obviously, you had hits like Without Me, Cleaning Out My Closet, Sing for the Moment, all that stuff was on that record. And I had not, to my knowledge, heard anything in the realm of rap before then. I grew up in a very like 80s pop rock sort of glam metal household.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Me
yeah.
too.
And yeah, so I mean Eminem is probably like everyone's first exposure to hip hop that is a 90s kid, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms like branching out from that, when I kind of fell in love with that, I discovered more music by exploring the guest features on
Mhm.
his songs. So that's how I discovered people like Dr. Dre, Obi Trice, D12, Snoop Dogg, Exhibit, like all these like really prolific names. And I think it was probably grade 8 or so when I got into local hip hop, like Aussie hip hop. Hilltop Hoods and Bliss and Esso had been on the radio a bunch, and I would have heard, songs like Still Standing or Addicted, played before. But I remember Cigarettes by Illy got really big on the radio that year, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is my native tongue. You've got, piano with this really kind of driven, inspiring story in the lyrics. It was like, it just resonated with me so deeply, and that was, I guess, what clicked, where it's like, shit, I can do this.
Yeah.
Because I remember starting out, I like made some friends of mine rap with me because I was like, I want a crew. I don't want to do this alone.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you guys, you like music. You can listen to this. Try write like this guy. Try sound like this guy. And we would download like MP3s from YouTube of Eminem instrumentals and rap over them in our own lyrics in an American accent on like lunch breaks at school.
Yeah.
We would like record on a school laptop we'd hire out on recess with like a DJ Hero USB mic
Oh,
we
no.
borrowed from a friend. We
Please
caught the
tell me
bus
these.
with.
Please tell me these recordings exist somewhere.
Oh,
on-
dude, they'll be somewhere. They will never see the light of
Yeah.
day, but they will be somewhere. But yeah, so listening to a lot of Eminem, Yeah, the big names for me, I was kind of more so a West Coast guy, so I listened to a lot of Dr. Dre and Exhibit and artists like that. And then probably wouldn't have been till I was about 18 or so. I got into the East Coast side of things. You had like the legends like Nas and Jay-Z.
Hmm.
You had Gangstar. Like there's so many to name. Mob Deep. Um, but yeah, the local hip hop was sort of where it really took off for me. I guess because of how like well I resonated with it, and I pretty much exclusively listened to Australian hip hop and Eminem. So
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
for many years, many of my formative years. And it was always funny whenever I came across someone who also listened to hip hop or appreciated rap, and they would say, "Oh, so who do you listen to?" And they like rattle off all these names. I was like, "Nah, man. Like, I listen to these guys. Like,
Yeah.
I like it was just something so like it felt more personal, knowing like these guys were like from my city or like
Hmm.
I've been to this place that they mentioned in that song or that artist that they're talking about listening to on the bus when they were growing up like I did that like it was just like I could see me doing that kind of thing, so that's where the I guess drive and the passion really kicked off for it. And Linkin Park actually, I'll give them props because they're like favorite band of all time. They were like the first band I probably got into. I think the first CD I had was a burnt copy of Hybrid Theory. Not like first CD I bought. It was
So
just
in
given
one of
from a
those,
family member.
one of those gold,
It was like a
like
scratched
ones.
jewel case from something else and
It
had
was like
like
a green
marker written
plastic
on.
filter,
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
that you slip it into. Yeah.
We like reprinted the back inlay for the CD case and it was all like pixelated and
Yeah.
shit. But yeah, man, I played the shit out of that every day. And yeah, so Mike Shinoda and Fort Minor, his side project as well, was super influential for being exposed to hip hop as well. So that probably also was the beginning of my um, love affair, I guess, with metal music and heavy music
Yeah.
because it was just blending my two favorite styles. So.
I think that's an interesting point to make about that very, very specific period of the early 2000s, like that
Mm,
sort of music, because I was thinking about this the other day. I always meet people who are super into metal music, and they almost always will say that they also enjoy some kind of rap music.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
weird, because like they seem completely opposed to one another, like they're the
Mm,
antithesis of each other as far as the
yeah.
sounds goes, but there's a really huge like Venn overlap of people
Mm,
who are like, yeah, I love heavy
for
metal and
sure.
rap. So,
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like a lot of people will kind of give Linkin Park shit for any album post Meteora. But they were a band that did something different on every record. If you're gonna make the same record over and over again, why are you a band? Why are you releasing music?
yeah.
And almost every heavy artist I've read an interview with or interviewed, and we've spoken about influences. Linkin Park always comes up, man.
Hmm.
So that whole new metal scene of the late 90s, early 2000s was, I think, like all those gateway bands like Linkin Park, Korn, Slipknot, Mudvayne, even like Bring Me the Horizon later on as well. Architects, like that was everyone's kind of like opening into that whole world.
I genuinely believe that there is this thing that happens when an artist who was formerly the biggest thing ever or was like the thing
Mm,
gets like, I don't know, a decade out from the biggest that they'll ever be. And
yeah.
for some reason, everyone looks back on them poorly for a very brief period of time
Right.
and then immediately begins appreciating them later down the track. Like,
Yeah.
there was a whole period where everyone was like, nah, the Beatles overrated, like, or whatever. And now everyone's just like, nah, okay, they were great. And it's the same. It's the same with Linkin Park, man. There was a period where it
Yeah.
was uncool to like Linkin Park, and it was like, man,
Mm.
why? Like, they're
Yeah.
still a great band, and whether you don't like their newer music that came
Mm.
out, I don't know.
Yeah, they're still the same guys that wrote Paper Cut and One Step Closer and In the End and Crawling. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, they were like, in their 20s, possibly younger, when
yeah.
like they made that album. So like, give them a break. It's like the fucking snare drum in Saint Anger. Like, I don't think they're ever gonna
Oh
live that
man,
down. But
I call that the Heinz baked bean tin lid, like, because it just
yeah,
sounds like you're
the
tapping it.
trash can.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting what you were saying, I guess, about like that Venn diagram of rap and hip hop. And I guess like where like you said at the start, coming from a very kind of like almost protest background. Like look at artists like Rage.
Yeah, so good.
It's again you're blending heavy music with hip hop, and it's like every track is speaking about something that is like a violation of human rights, or
Yep.
some tragic event that's happened, that's often sort of swept under the rug by government and things like that. And I think that's sort of how new metal possibly came about. You had hip hop music that was, people that are living in, housing projects, and, they're struggling to live comfortably and sustain themselves. So there's a lot of anguish that's coming out in their music. And then you've got, metal musicians who, it's a release, it's sort of alleviating a lot of tension and, negative emotions. So when you get those two together, it's kind of a match made in heaven.
It's interesting. You say that like it's a release, because I do see it as like a gas valve that gets opened, and like
Mm.
music is a an escape. And it was funny. I was listening to an interview with Bruce Springsteen where
Yeah.
he was talking about this, and he said it's hard to explain now, but he's like, when we were kids and we saw the Beatles play
Mm.
and we saw Elvis like moving his hips, that was the first time something slightly sexually suggestive ever
Right.
was given like in front of us, and we had this thing where it was like girls go to see music, and
Mm.
we know that girls like music, and like there was this suggestion, and he was like, it's
Yeah.
hard to explain now because like literally like we have songs like
Yeah.
WAP, and it's
Yeah,
like, where
yeah,
it's like,
that's
but
right,
he
yeah.
was like, it's so hard to explain. He's like, when you grew up with a Catholic family and
Mm.
everything was strict Sundays, and you went to a music, like you went to people playing music, and we got to dance and listen to it. It's like rock and roll felt dangerous,
Yes,
and
yes.
I think that like
Well,
punk
even the
was
term
great.
rock and roll is like slang for sex, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I there's been periods where bands come out and I remember them feeling like dangerous. I
Mm.
remember the first time I heard Eminem, it had like the explicit thing on the front, and he was like
Yeah.
swearing and saying like, I was like, are you
Yeah.
allowed to, like, oh my god? And
Yeah.
people would like care about whether kids were listening to it, and I don't know, I
Mm.
feel like we've lost that a little.
Yeah, we're definitely desensitized as an audience these days. I feel that. I think because so much commercial music, or music that is accessible, I'll say, um is like about things like, sex or drugs or just partying and having fun and being young and all that kind of thing. It's like, um, I don't know. We're just used to it now. Like everyone,
Yeah,
it's just a generational thing, I guess.
didn't kill off
But
the youth. Like, turns
yeah,
out we aren't like worshiping Satan or whatever.
yeah,
I
that's
don't know.
right. I mean, heavy music is just. It's like I saw a guy wearing a shirt at a heavy show recently, and it said "angry music for happy people," and I feel like
Yeah.
that's sort of playing into that release kind of thing. It's like same with hip hop, man. Like a lot of people I know that listen to hip hop sort of casually, they refer to it as their house cleaning music.
Yeah,
And it's like
right.
there's nothing like just opening up the windows and doors, getting rid of some things. You're just wearing some baggy old clothes, and you're blasting some like Wu-Tang or
Yeah.
Cypress Hill or something through your house. And nothing makes you feel like more of a badass when you're like at some like traffic lights with your windows down and this filthy
Oh.
breakdown comes on, or
Yeah.
you've got like some old school boom bap beat sort of coming out your windows. So yeah, it definitely gives you like kind of a sense of empowerment as well that a lot of people don't have, which I think is why Eminem took off, because
Yeah.
so many like people were in that position but had no voice, and he kind of gave them that voice. And then obviously we got songs like The Real Slim Shady because everyone wanted to be like him. So
And then on the other side of things, it's just fun to sing along to. When you
Oh,
when you
dude.
hit a rap verse, when you learn one,
yeah,
it is like
yeah.
I mean, I do it. There's specifically "Express Yourself" by NWA is like
Oh,
one of my
sick, sick.
favorite songs of all time. And
That's
like
cool.
when I do it, like my girlfriend just like looks at me with the biggest disgust
Just
as I'm
cringe.
like smashing it out.
It is such a cool feeling, man. I remember when I was in like this group called Tech Crew in high school, and it was like a bunch of students who essentially just did like audio visual setups for like productions and assemblies and stuff as like a learning thing. And to test the mic, I'd be rapping like till I collapse or when the music stops and things like that, because I was like so proud that I learnt it. And we just like cue up the instrumentals and stuff and then get yelled at by teachers. But yeah, man, like when people were like trying to learn Rap God and stuff, and even like Godzilla, that newer track that he's
Mhm.
dropped, like he's one of those artists where he's definitely not at the sort of caliber or the peak that he was, in the middle of his career, and he's like blatantly admitted that he'll never get there, but he's like he's sort of choosing a different route by rapping quicker, because he's like, all right, no one could rap the way I did back then. I don't rap like that anymore. If I rap really fucking fast, no one is gonna be able to do what I do now either.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's always a step ahead.
He's become like the Tommy Emmanuel, like the guy who's just so good. You're like, he doesn't write songs that I sing along to anymore, but he's that stuff you look at and you go,
Yeah.
oh, how are you doing that?
Mm,
Like that's impossible. Like,
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, so many ideas these days musically are just recycled or borrowed, and it's so hard to be original or different, especially in like the streaming structures as well. Like these models that we have of like accessing music, it's hard to stand out with the oversaturation. So you've either got to be really, really good or just have like promo everywhere and just like spam people's socials and ads and billboards and all that stuff. Because it's just like there really is like something like they're like music genres like subreddits. There's like there's
yeah.
something for everything. So
I'm always impressed by how creative people can be with how they advertise things, and I'm like, how
Yeah.
did I not think of that? There was a
Mm.
dude on Twitter. I honestly have Twitter purely because, like, you ever see someone post a tweet and you're just like, that can't be real.
Right.
And then so you go on and you look it up. Mine
Mm.
was just doing that. That's all Twitter was for me. And
Yeah.
somehow this guy, he's a hip hop artist. I can't remember his name. Would put a post up and somehow it'd end up in my feed and it would say he sent me a message. And then when
Oh.
you open up the post, it was just a post
Oh.
that says so and so sent you a message.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, that is so frustratingly genius. And don't do that ever again.
Yeah,
But,
that's
like,
yeah. It's like when U2 had like their new album like for free on everyone's like Apple update, and they're like, "Ew, get it off."
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
And because like you couldn't get it off or something
yeah,
for a while. It was like
you could
couldn't
not remove it, and they got shit for it. I mean, I love U2, but
I love you
that
too,
that
man.
would be annoying. But yeah, it's I think Kanye. I don't know the specifics, but I think he like made an album recently that you could only get by buying an MP3 player through his website or something.
Yeah, you. Oh no,
which
I
is
think
like,
that was Wu-Tang.
oh, that
they-
was Wu-Tang?
They had this thing where it was like they only made one, and you
Right.
had to buy it, and it was like a box of cassettes or something like that. I'm
Mm.
probably getting that wrong, but yeah, they made one copy, and you could
Yeah.
only get it in that version.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's getting weirder and weirder. Weezer dropped a track, and the way that you could hear it, it wasn't on like, Spotify and YouTube or even like SoundCloud. You had to download this music app that looked like a turntable, and if you held the screen down and like physically turned around in a circle at different speeds, it played the song like you were the turntable, like
Right, that's
you were the
kinda cool.
record.
That's kind of cool, but
Yeah,
like
it's a sick
it's a gimmick,
idea,
right?
but
Like
it's so inconvenient, but it's a sick
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
that's how do you feel about records? I'm a huge vinyl fan, but also I don't think people are listening to them properly because they buy like $30 record players and play them
Yeah.
out of these awful
Yeah,
speakers.
you get like the cheap ones with built-in speakers. Man, record collecting is a slippery slope. I
Yep.
found that out the hard way. I can't remember what my first vinyl was because I've been collecting CDs for as long as I can remember. And I've got like media towers at home full of CDs and like briefcases full of records. But with the vinyl, a lot of it is like still in its wrapping because I don't have a turntable yet. A lot of it came down. I think a lot of it arose from cool variants or like
Yeah.
limited editions and things like, oh man, I gotta have that as like a collector. And I don't really buy CDs so much these days because it's kind of like I was buying CDs for the medium, whereas I buy records for the like collector's aspect. So
Yeah.
it's like just something cool to have. It's not so much like I'm buying this because it's the only way I can hear it kind of thing. Yeah, man, I can't remember what my first record was, but it's quite funny. It started out being like, all right, I'm just gonna buy a handful of like my absolute favorite albums of all time, and I'm gonna like frame them or put them on a wall or spine them out in a rack or something and have them on display. And then, I would start getting records for birthdays and Christmases. There'd be like, 20% off sales at JB, and I'd grab like an armful. And next thing you know, I think last time I counted, it was probably a month ago, and I had like over 70, and I've got no turntable. But I mean, like you've got like cool color variants. You've got the splatters. You've got like the signed ones. You've got ones that are pressed like
see-through ones.
yeah, like, 1 of 1,000, things like that. And it's just like too tempting, man. Like Rocking Horse Records in Brisbane here is like my home away from home. I don't go there enough, but I always walk out with something. So
I think I was sort of before saying about like with the Eminem stuff when you pick up the CD and it had explicit written on it and everything like that. I feel there's something tangible about that the record purchasing experience gives, where you have this physical thing that you can look
Yes.
at, and it was like an object that had some
Right.
semblance of meaning. Whereas if you were to listen to, like, let's say, like, I don't know, if someone gave you a CD and they're like, "Man, you got to listen to this."
Mm.
It's like you had it there and it was this thing and you could
It's
read.
like a tangible thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
would
whole process.
take the
Yeah.
booklet out and I'd read the lyrics on the inside of
Yes.
the
Flick through
booklet.
the liner notes, learn the
Yeah.
words. Yeah,
Look at the pictures and stuff.
for
And
sure.
now it's sort of like it pops up on Spotify, and if you don't like it in the first 10 seconds, you can just skip
Mm.
or close. Or
Yeah, man, it's dangerous. I think like with streaming, it's yeah, unless you're like added to a curated playlist, or you feature on someone bigger than you, on one of their tracks or something. It's like so hard to get noticed in the sea of all the other artists. But yeah, I think I was talking to someone not too long ago about this. I think with like records or even just CDs, it was the whole ritual of it. It's
Mhm.
like I guess with local bands as well, like you're supporting them more because if it's like some band that's opened up for someone at your local dive and they've got a merch desk at the back and they're selling, shirts for $30, CDs for 10. Like if you grab that, like that's gonna be their fuel to get to the next city on that tour. Like it's not,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? Whereas if you bought like I guess a CD from like a retail store, the artist might see like I don't know, a tenth of a percent of that. But
I think was saying this the other day. I feel that bands have almost become like t-shirt vendors. That's basically like
yes,
where the
yeah,
majority of the money seems to come, because you
for
don't get money
sure.
from streaming. Like you get
Mm,
$12 for how many thousands of streams, and then
yeah,
um,
absolutely. When you're starting out, for sure, because I think like if you're, unless you're like hosting your own gigs and you're like running the show, you're the headline act, and people are paying to see you, you're not really getting like a whole lot from the ticket sales. But if you sell, like 20 shirts after a show for $30 a piece, like yeah, that's definitely the leading revenue stream I feel as an independent artist. And I mean, I'm a local music fanatic. Probably like local bands, like local acts, probably make up something like 85% of the music I listen to. And I try to go to as many shows as I can. I'm at gigs like weekly, and then
mad
um
respect for that.
oh, thanks,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, and then like you check out the supports and you discover more music. So it's just like it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, and it's a win-win. Like you're having a good time, you're discovering new artists you can get behind, you're supporting the locals. Yeah, it's fulfilling. It's a two-way street.
That's honestly part of the reason why I do this as
Mm,
well, is because there's just something that I don't know, the people around you are the ones that are either going to lift you up or like,
yeah, man.
yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think there's just something to supporting the people that are around you.
Mm,
That's like I'll go to shows if I don't even really dig the genre of music, but
right.
if it's people that I know
Mm,
that are just like putting themselves out there, because that's the hardest part. Like
yeah, man.
there's
Yeah,
it looks like when you see it on the surface that it's all easy and it all comes together, like
yeah.
everything falls into place, then you ended up on a stage.
Yeah,
But
it's almost like when you're at school and you got to deliver a speech or something, and the teacher's like, "Oh, don't talk until they're done." Like you got to show the respect that you would expect if you were up there. It's kind of like that. Like there's nothing worse when you go to a show and there's like 30 people in front, and like people in the front row like talking amongst themselves and laughing or like looking at their phones and shit, and there's like some kid is on stage pouring their heart out. It's
mhm,
like I have so much respect for openers, man.
yeah,
It shows, particularly if like no one's heard of them, but. Yeah, it is not easy to get up on a stage, and particularly as creatives, we're empaths. We put a lot of ourselves in our music, and to get up there and offer a piece of you to the world, not knowing whether it's going to be received or rejected, it's a big deal, and I
I,
guess not a lot of people get that.
I was gonna say that it's so rare that people are making music that has absolutely no tangible connection to who they are as people. Like
Mm,
when someone is performing music that made themselves, there's always a part of them in there somewhere. And
yeah, yeah.
that's why when someone doesn't like what you do, it's very rarely a case of just being, I just don't really like it. It's like, no, it feels way more personal
Mm,
because that song meant
absolutely.
X, Y, and Z to me, and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I was talking to someone I work with just yesterday about that actually, or the day before. How like there's times when I'll listen to music for something to have in the background if I just want to get amped up, or you know um I've got like some cleaning to do, or I'm at the gym or something like that. But like I try to seek out music that moves me. Like if I'm playing music, it's not like a passive experience. It's
Mhm.
something that I'm like actively engaging with. So, um, yeah, I'm a big believer in sort of like listening to music and making music as well. Hopefully, that sort of connects with people. Because it is the universal language, you know. So it's like music has the power to, you know, bring people together like nothing else in the world. Like there's, you know, sporting events, there's like political protests and things like that. But like music is just something else. It's just like this like spiritual vessel almost, you know. And sorry, that got deep.
No, no, that's
That got
cool.
deep real
I
quick.
was letting you go. I was like, no, I'm in
Uh,
100% agreement.
yeah.
Um,
And it's like I was at a show recently. It was Deadlights at man, where was that? Princess Theatre, I think. And Dylan, the frontman of Deadlights, was saying like heavy music shows are like the only safe space in the world where you can collectively lose your shit and nothing like there's no repercussions. Like it's
yeah.
expected. And
Um,
he called it beautiful madness, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's again like we were saying, it's that release. It's the release valve on the
For
tank
sure.
that
For
like
sure.
because I had a friend that called me up and was like, "Oh, I want to go to see Idols."
Cool
In
band.
yeah, and I listened to a bit of their music and was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I sort of get it. It's cool. It's pretty punky. Like
Mm.
I love that sort of stuff. And there's something about that especially like that kind of music that you don't have to know it like word for word, but you can
Mm.
show up and feel it just the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
like we just showed up, and I knew like maybe 5 of the songs, but
Mm.
I'm moshed and got into it. And it's
Yeah, yeah, hell yeah.
the feeling afterwards of everyone walking out, everyone's covered in sweat, but you're all looking at each other like, yeah, that was sick. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you start getting pushed around, and someone grabs your arm and they pull you back up, and then
Mm.
you turn around and some guy's throwing hands like he's
Yeah.
shadowboxing like a demon. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's man,
Like-
heavy shows are gnarly. It's so good though. Like, good friend of mine and I, we go to heavy shows together often, and it's just like it's like we call the crowd like friends you never met.
Yep.
And it's like everyone, you know, a heavy show, there's a pit going, wall of death, circle pits, whatever, and you fall down, you get picked back up. It's like an unwritten rule, you know what I mean? Like, sure, you might like cop an elbow to the face, or you know, someone might like spill beer down your
Yeah.
leg, or you might get like a joint in the back or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
like, it's just like there's this respect, and like everyone's just got like love for each other, and it's almost like it's like a I don't know. It's weird because it's like this. It looks like it's an angry event, but it's just like a big family kind of thing.
It's funny too because the best concerts I've ever been to with the best people
Mm.
were always heavy shows.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember the first gig I ever went to that was like that was actually North Lane. They
Oh,
played
sick.
it was North Lane and the Amity Affliction.
Oh,
they,
wow.
They played at some under 18s festival when I was still in high school.
Mm.
And I went because Pez was playing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, sick. That's so cool.
So I got a photo with him and Shepherd before they were big as well.
Oh,
were
wow.
there as
What
well.
a weird lineup.
Yeah, it was really odd because I
Yeah.
remember all the day bands were like pop bands and
Mm.
DJs and stuff. And the Dillinger Escape Plan, I think is
Oh,
what
shit,
they were.
okay.
They came out, and I noticed that all the people around me had gone from wearing like bright clothes and dresses, and
Yeah.
everyone started looking like they were wearing all these black
Also,
clothes.
there's like, yeah,
and I was
a
like,
lot of Vans, a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of like singlets and backwards snapbacks.
yeah, and like you start getting pushed up on the barrier a little tighter, and then North Lane came out, and I was not expecting it because I'd listened to Quantum Flux, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came out and they started sound checking, and he just hits the notes on the guitar, and it was just so guttural and deep. I was like,
Yeah, like
What is-
drop A or something.
yeah, yeah. I was like, what is that?
yeah.
And yeah, it was crazy because like everyone was just throwing hands, like doing their thing, and that was the first like heavy mosh pit I've ever been in.
Yeah.
Nicest people, you fall down, they pick you back
Yeah,
up.
for sure, yeah.
And the worst people I've ever met were at a Foo Fighters concert and a Bon Jovi show.
Dude, the
So-
worst crowd I've ever been a part of was a folk gig. It
Yeah,
was
dude.
it was two dudes. It was Paddy. We used to work with.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Two dudes playing acoustic guitar on stage at Sold Out Tivoli, and the crowd was so rowdy. They were all just like, the type you'd expect to see in like a Splendor crowd, but
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
they were like loud, and they're like flinging elbows and stuff and spilling drinks and shit. I was so uncomfortable at that folk show, but I'm
Yeah.
like at home in the pit at like a hardcore show.
Yeah, I've never felt more uncomfortable than at Adele. That was the strangest concert I've ever been to
What?
because
How?
I was so far from the I wasn't super far from the stage, but I was far enough away that
Yeah.
and because it was at the Gabba,
Yeah.
so the spaces between the chairs, there's like lots of gaps,
Yeah.
and so you're just kind of standing there with like a lot of room, and there was like 30, just like my section was just exclusively like 40, 50-year-old women,
Mm.
and I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do.
Yeah,
Like,
I guess if it's slower music as well, and you're not like up close enough to like really get into it, it's like, what do? You just
Yeah,
kind of like
her
pull
music
the lighter out, or
her music doesn't lend itself to like doing anything more than kind of like doing
yeah,
this.
yeah, that's right. You got the slow head nod and the
I was
you
like, do
got
I feel rude if I sit down?
the
At
two
least,
step.
yeah, at least when someone comes out and rips a guitar, I know I'm like, okay, I can just
Yeah,
jump around. And
yeah,
like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so
hip hop's funny too, like that. It's like there's like there's like some signature moves if you're like rapping on stage. You know, you've got like
the side
the
to
arm
side,
up, like
yeah.
the put your arm up and like bring that up and down to the beat. You've got like the um the head nod, the two step, the call and response, like hell yeah kind of thing. And you can always pick the people in the crowd that like either have never been to a hip hop show before or they're just like casual listeners and like they're clapping out of time. They're like you know, they're like swinging their arms in the opposite way that the artist is doing. It's just so it's funny, but hip hop's different. Like I've been to a few different rap shows, and there's some that's been like real hard, kind of like energetic, trap artists where it's almost like a mosh pit at the front. And then I've been to like, artists like Hilltop Hoods and Bliss and Esso, where it's like these really large sold out venues, and you've got like sort of slow jams or like really wholesome kind of songs, and everyone's kind of like just got a lighter in the air, and there's sort of two ends of the spectrum, I guess, which just comes down like as well to those different subgenres of it, I suppose. But um, yeah, live shows, man. I really got to get back into it. That's hold me accountable. Next year,
Yeah.
I'm getting back in a gig again.
No, I will come to yours, you come to mine,
yeah,
and
that's
we
right.
will go to others.
For
That's
sure,
yeah.
for sure. Let's do it. But I really miss it, man. I remember because I've only ever like had a proper gig like maybe 10 times, but my first one was man, it would have been like 2014 or something, I think, and it was this small scale festival called Scorcher Fest, which is no longer a thing, and it was at New Globe Theatre, which is also no more, in the Valley. And
Played that.
yeah, and I can't remember when on the bill I was on. I probably would have been somewhere in the middle, and I played to maybe, I don't know, 30 people, I'd say. Probably a third of that were people I know. Had like a rent a crowd going. But no, it was a weird kind of system, that festival, because you had to like apply to perform, and it involved like buying the tickets, like a certain amount of tickets, and then reselling them. And
Oh.
then you would like get that money back, but it would be like slightly more than what you paid. It was a really weird model. And anyway, I had
They
like
call it a scam, dude.
yeah. I had like my mum and stepdad came down, which are like my biggest supporters. The crew came down, a bunch of my closest friends, and even like my family in Victoria. Like the only family I have up here are my mum and stepdad. I grew up in Victoria. And like even my mum's family in Melbourne like bought tickets, like knowing they couldn't
Yeah.
go, just so they could like sell out my share, and I could make the money, that was cool. But yeah, I remember I just had like a laptop running with an auxiliary cord, and just had the beats playing through that and like rapping over them. There was no like overdubs where I could take a breath. I didn't have like anyone playing live instruments on stage, anything like that. I didn't really know even how to hold a mic, let alone about like breath control or stage presence or anything. And I got
actually-
really good feedback. Like people loved it. I had no idea it was my first show, so I guess that's a good thing.
It's a question that I have because watching you perform, one of the things, first of all, I don't know how you remember the lyrics, because
muscle memory, man.
It's A4 pages of lyrics
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But managing to enunciate it in a way
Yeah.
that people can hear it through an SM58, which as soon as you get close to your mic,
Yeah.
it becomes
Gets like
bassier.
muddy and
Yeah. And then making sure that you are clear enough
Mm.
to everything else going on and trying to be a performer at the
Yeah.
same time.
It's it comes down to three things, I think. Firstly, mic technique. So like, you've all seen like those videos of like the '90s rappers, and they're like cabbaging the grill of the mic and
This
like
thing,
holding
yeah.
it right to their lips, and you can't hear a damn thing they're saying. So if you've like, you grip it, below the grill and you hold it like a few inches from the mouth, like you're gonna hear it a lot clearer than if you held it right up to your mouth, right? Like you guys know this being
Yeah, yeah.
musicians. In terms of like the clarity, breath control is important. Like you need to allow those sort of spaces between bars where you can get a breath in, and because it's really awkward when you can see a rapper, and I've been there many times, like coming to the end of like a line and they're struggling for breath and they just got like stop halfway through, and it's kind of cringe, but
Have the asthmatic inhale.
yeah, that's right. And like these days, a lot of people have sort of dubs of, maybe every second bar or even just the choruses in the beat. So
Mhm.
like when they're rapping over it, they deliberately leave that in so they can take a breath or just to emphasize a line. And a lot of artists as well have hype men where, there'll be someone on stage that's kind of like amping up the crowd for them and finishing their lines so they've got room to breathe and stuff. Um,
That is something actually that I was interested in as well. Is
yeah.
the like hip hop doesn't necessarily lend itself to huge amounts of instrumentation. It's
Mm.
usually a lot of like program. Well, I think maybe now it is more program than it was.
Like in terms of in the live setting or the
Yeah,
song
yeah.
itself? Yeah,
And I
yeah.
sort of have seen videos of I think it was Migos or something doing
Yeah.
something live, and it was just them all sitting there with a microphone with no band, and it sounded awful. And I was sort of thinking,
Yeah.
like, how do you like? Because like I remember I had an ex girlfriend who told me she went to see One Direction,
Mm.
and 5 Seconds of Summer opened, and they
Okay.
had because like that was back when they were a little bit
With
more
like a
rockier.
little, almost like a pop
They
punk
w
kind of.
Yeah, they couldn't
Yeah.
quite decide what they wanted to be,
Yep,
and
yep.
she's like, "Man, they hit the kick drum, and it was like the waves went through me," and
Mm.
I was like, "Yeah, that's what instruments being played through
Yes,
hyper
yes.
amplified, like, sounds," and
Yeah.
I was interested in how that translates to hip hop and still keeps the
Yeah.
vibe.
Yeah. I've seen a few different hip hop shows done. What I do is I just run my beats through like if I don't have a DJ who's got decks that we can sort of like plug USB in and run them through there so they can sort of do scratches and stuff over the top or effects or whatever. We just sort of run them through like an auxiliary cable from a laptop, man. Um, but I've like seen shows where there's full bands. Like I remember years ago I saw Eminem at Suncorp Stadium supported by Kendrick, and they had like full bands, they had like bass, drums, guitar. I've seen Draft play at a festival and he had like a four-piece like brass section on stage. Like even something I see done a lot these days is rappers will sort of have their beats going through a laptop or something, and they'll just have a drummer,
Yeah,
and
okay.
it's just like so all the kind of like um the instruments, I guess like that comprise the track, like you've got the bass, the guitar, the synths, whatever, like the keys, that they're all happy to sort of play that through the computer, but I guess the drums just makes it a little punchier and
Yeah, yeah.
makes it feel live, because sometimes like I suffer from this if I don't have access to a DJ or it's just a small show, but um like when you see a rap performance and it's literally just like them rapping over a track, like it's you can
Yeah.
you can tell something's missing, right? And yeah, so like it depends on like the production value and like the scale of the venue and the artist, I guess, as well. But yeah, a lot of the time locally at smaller shows I'm seeing it'll just be like beats through some decks with a DJ at the back and a drummer,
Mhm.
which is really interesting. So yeah.
On the subject of beats, that's something that interests me because obviously
Mm.
writing, like my style of music is basically just pop. That's probably the
Right.
way where I would put it.
Mm.
There's like a multitude of ways that the songs can come about. Normally, it's an acoustic guitar. You're just
Mm.
sitting there and you're playing and you find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. So like the way that my songs come together. So I'm fairly new in the realm of producing. I've only been producing for a couple years, and I haven't actually like rapped any of my own beats. I like upload catalogs to SoundCloud and Dropbox and stuff, and I got like a friend I make music with Shout out to Tony, who is a crazy good producer, and I essentially, I will like make a demo and I'll send the track and the stems to a producer and say, hey, I kind of want this, but better. And then they'll either like, just ask what key it's in or ask what chords are being played, and then they'll sort of do their own thing. Or they'll ask for like some stems and they'll put in like, their own hi-hats or their own synths or their own strings, things like that. So it's
Mhm.
almost like I've co-produced it, which the EPs, the one I dropped last year and the one that I'll be dropping next year, they're all kind of co-produced by me. Where I've done that. I've kind of like sent a producer a beat idea with stems, and they've sort of just made it their own. But because I write so much, like after speaking to a lot of artists about how they create, I find I kind of do it backwards. I write the lyrics and come up with melodies often before I have the music, and most people will like, you know, have the chords or have the melody, and then they think of something to go to it that like sort of fits the rhythm or whatever. I guess it's different in hip hop because like a lot of the time the inflections are more so to do with like the meter and the flow as opposed to
Mhm.
kind of like the melody and stuff. Um, and I have found in the past, if I've written to a beat, the song comes about much quicker because it's just kind of more organic, I guess.
It's like pushing you along
Yeah, yeah.
almost. Like,
Yeah, and like I used to suffer from always doing this stock standard like textbook structure of 3 16-bar verses and an 8-bar hook slapped in between. And that was like every song was like, your 3.5 minutes with that structure. And I would like have a song idea. I'd write down the initial set of lyrics and I'd pick at it over time. And if I had like maybe, two verses, or if I had, one verse and a really great hook, or, and I needed some more bars, I would be in this mindset where it's like, oh man, I've got like these beats that I've got to put this song to, like I need to flesh it out. And then as a result, like the second half of the song might not be as good or as strong lyrically as the first half. And then kind of as I got older and listened to a lot more music, I kind of realized that there is no set structure. Like there's like formula that you can use as like a guide. But and I was always kind of wondered how artists like Bliss and Esso, um, for example, or Spit Syndicate, like duos were sort of writing their songs, and I was kind of study that because it's like, well, if there's meant to be 3 bar verses, sorry, 3 16-bar verses, or 2 24s, whatever, in a track, like how do two people do it? Is it like verse chorus bridge? Is it verse double chorus? Like I would kind of delve deep into the sort of the science behind the writing, and yeah, there's a few different things you can do, I guess. Like depending on the song, you can put a bridge. Like I'm gravitating towards singing a lot more in my songs, which I guess makes it catchier, but also it like kind of makes it interesting as well. So it's not just like straight bars, for like 3 minutes. It would get tiresome, particularly like you were saying in today's consumer attention span.
yeah,
um,
the TikTok attention span.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. That's right. So yeah, I always write, well, almost always, I should say, will write lyrics first. And because I write almost every day, whether it's, journaling or it's poetry or it's a song, um, it's kind of at a point where it just kind of like flows. So it's never like I never have writer's block, so I don't suffer from that, which I guess is I take for granted sometimes. But musically, like, I taught myself to play keys, I taught myself to play guitar, and it's like real basic stuff, like just
Yeah, yeah.
chords and like simple melodies. And sometimes I'll like think of a really cool hook, so I'll kind of sit at a keyboard or a MIDI keyboard on my computer, or I'll strum an acoustic guitar or something to sort of see what direction it'll take. And then that will kind of like determine the I guess the mood or like the topic of the song. So it's like, depending on the chord progression, we'll see, oh, like flick through my notebook, what lyrics would fit with this sound kind of thing. But I'm also now experimenting more with like flows. So rather than kind of like song structures and things like that, it'll be sort of like, how can I have more variation and make this track more interesting as opposed to just rapping at this person for 3 minutes. So yeah, like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
have flow switch ups, that like choppy flow that a lot of rappers are doing these days, or um, I'll have like turnaround bars. But I'm like super big into the like the science of hip hop, like the lyric writing, and I think that's why I gravitated to hip hop when I was getting into, I guess, transitioning from being like a music fan to a musician
Mhm.
was like, because I read and I wrote, I was big into wordplay, and I like making things work when they wouldn't necessarily. Like I like fitting things together. I love puns, man. Like double entendres. You'll find one in almost every song I write.
Can
Things
you
like
give us
that.
an example? No, it doesn't have to be yours, but what like
Yeah.
one that you'll be like, that's like the one.
I remember I had a song called Almost Alive, and there was a line in that where I would say, I'd say I'm afraid so. I need to be stitched up to remain to be sane though. Like that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's
And
cool.
like, um, yeah, just puns like that. I was just always a big fan of, and I guess I got that from Eminem. And like Suffer from Hilltop Hoods and Bliss from Bliss and Esso and stuff like that. But uh yeah, so I was like really big into the wordplay kind of things, but also the syllables. Like in hip hop, working with syllables is a big thing where less so these days, I guess, in styles where like it's a lot more singing and people are more so focused on like harmonies and things rather than kind of the technical side of things. That's always been like a niche kind of underground thing. Um, but like the amount of syllables. So if I want to rhyme something, with that like you need that like meter of the bars. So you've got like the flow and it's the track kind of ebbs and flows and the amount of syllables that you have in a rhyme. Like you listen to some artists that are real into that shit and it's like a whole sentence rhymes like consonant for consonant, which is insane. And then you've got artists that will rhyme like brain with insane and plain and stuff like that. And it's like I'm just not a big fan of lazy writing. And I think that's why hip hop was my like my go-to. Yeah.
What I guess on the subject of lazy writing, how was what was the first like sort of songs that you started writing? How did they
Mm.
like? Because I feel that when I first started writing songs, everything was A B A B A B,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Yeah.
train rhymes with plane, and
Yeah. There's always the safe ones you keep in your pocket for when you're desperate.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I go back to my older songs, a lot of it was kind of like A, B, 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 C, 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 D, 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 D. Like it was real because what I would do is I would write lyrics as they came to me and I would sort of, have like, notebooks and notebooks full of just random lyrics. And I would go through, pick out ones that were like similar style or similar subject matter and put them together and make them work. So the fact that I wrote in like couplets or quartets meant that I could just like piece songs together with these little stanzas that I'd written. Whereas nowadays I try if I like have inspo and I've got like a rhyme or I've got a line that I think of, I'll kind of try and make myself write a whole verse even if I don't use that full verse or I need to tweak it, moving forward because it's sort of for two reasons, I guess. One, it creates that habit of like finishing something you start, which as a musician, I'm sure you're aware is like the bane of our existence.
Yeah, when you said you
Um,
don't get writer's block, I was like, oh,
y-
all right.
yeah,
Yeah,
weird
wow, what's
flex,
that
but
like?
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah, but like, give me a guitar and I'll think of like the same song 10 times in a row. But yeah, and then also, it's too hard if you've like because inspiration is a flash in the pan, and if you don't capture it when it strikes, it's gone. A lot of the time, and yeah. So I try to get into the habit of like writing now a full verse or even a full song. Like there's been times I've written songs in like a matter of minutes, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's usually like there's a very clear goal. Very clear inspiration. It's usually like something has just happened that's made me want to write. So it's really easy.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so because nowadays I try to write full passages then and there, it flows better. The rhymes might be like I might have like a whole verse of the same rhyme, which might be like 8 to 16 bars of the same rhyme scheme, with maybe some internal switch ups as opposed to just the A B B kind of thing, which it just keeps it. I guess it's like a catch-22. I guess like the more variation you have, the more interesting it is. But if you are like deft enough that you can kind of use the same rhyme structure, um, for like longer than most people, then like that can also capture attention because it's like, oh shit, like they're still going. Like these guys still have ideas. Like one of the this is a bit of a weird kind of tangent, but there's a song from MMLP2 by Eminem called Legacy. And whenever people say they're an Eminem fan, I always tell them to listen back to this song because that song from memory is like 3 16-bar verses with an 8-bar hook, which is your stock standard like textbook hip hop structure. But the entire song is the same rhyme, which is like that blew my mind when I realized that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I don't know if he was just like going through the alphabet in his head when he's like writing that track, but it's impressive. Yeah, it's like it's not his best song, but the fact that he can do that is like
It's like
I love that
magic.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes I think that's a misconception with hip hop in general. Is like
Mm.
you always hear a lot of people say like, "Oh, you can't understand what they're saying," or "Oh,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
remember
real
my
music."
father saying that when I told him I wanted to be a rapper.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like,
Um,
anyone can do it.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. Not everyone can do it.
Mm.
And I think like it's funny hearing you explain like the bars. You're like, yeah, it's like 16 bars, 8. But and I'm like, oh, is it?
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
mean. Like I'm like that with other artists, man. Like when I'm interviewing other artists and they tell me like their creative process, it's like you're getting a glimpse into like this. It's like you've unlocked this. You know, you've got this key to this new avenue you can explore. So.
I always think that all music this is gonna sound like a terrible example, and then it's all gonna make sense. I feel.
Mm.
Looks if you were just looking on the outside, it's like a car.
Mm.
It's a car. It drives. It goes.
It's
You
a
put the
great
pedal down. You
analogy.
drive. But if you really want to understand it, you lift up the bonnet and you go,
Mm.
"Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot underneath this
Yeah,
that
yeah.
if you that makes it look easy because all the car
Mm.
does is drives, but to get it there, it requires so much.
That's
Like,
right.
There's so
That's
much
right.
underneath. So
Yeah, for sure. That's a great metaphor. I think like I put in a lot of the hard yards when I was young. Like, you know, when you first get into like that band that you love or that style of music that you've just discovered and it's like that's all you live and breathe until you know it like the back of your hand. I was like that with hip hop. Like I was listening to so many different artists and so many different songs and like picking their songs apart and analyzing them and comparing mine to theirs and like seeing what they did that worked, what I did that worked. And like after a while of like literally years of just studying the style, it's like you can kind of like get to a point where you're like, okay, I know what works, I know what doesn't. Now I'm gonna like find
yeah,
my voice and like how I'm gonna do it. And yeah, it's a constant like learning process as well. I feel making music is you're always trying to like one up yourself and do things a little different and push yourself. But yeah, it's like there's a lot to it. I guess you could find I guess similar like tiny moving parts if it were in any style of music. But with hip hop, yeah, it's just really fascinating for me, like from a lyrical perspective, I guess, like as a writer, and the fact that it's like kind of a very sort of word oriented style of music, like that just resonated with me. So I fell for hip hop and I fell hard.
it doesn't seem like a genre that lends itself to doing anything else. Like I never
Mm,
seem to meet people who are like, I'm into
right.
one guy. It's always like, and then I know like these like 40 different people, and
Mm,
yeah, it's real sweet. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I always find that people who like listen to it intently have so much. It's like,
mm,
whereas that's the difference between pop. I feel is a lot of people who are into pop seem to be into the pop that they're told to enjoy.
mm,
Like it's the stuff that comes up. Like I hate.
yeah.
I know people don't say this with the intention to piss me off, but when I ask someone what music they listen to, and I guess this is because I play on team, I make music, so
Yeah.
I'm like I usually care a little more, and they say,
Yeah.
I just listen to the radio.
Ah,
Which one?
yes,
Which
I hate
station?
that.
Like, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
and I just think like, did you never ever hear a song or a band that made you go, what is that? And then
Mm.
you went and listened to all 6 of their albums, and then
Yeah,
Googled
man.
like who they were into. Like that never
Yeah.
happened. You just went,
Totally, totally. I'm like that with I also love literature and film. And so when I talk to people and I about that stuff and I find out we like the same thing in you know that same book or that same style or that same movie and I was like, "Oh, really? What do you think?" And they're just like, "Yeah, it was good." And it's like there's so much more to say. Like, what do you mean it was good? It's like it's not a black and white question.
That's the tough thing with books, though, is because they're such an investment.
Mm,
It's usually easy to get on par with someone with movies because, like,
yeah,
it's an hour and a half, 90 minutes,
yeah,
2 hours, maybe three.
yeah,
Whereas with books, when you find someone who's read the same book as you, and you're like,
mm,
oh, so you took 2 weeks to get through
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and
It's a
then they're like,
journey.
it was all right. You're like, that's it, huh?
you're dedicating more of your life. See, I read like a lot of secondhand books as well. I just think it's kind of fascinating. Like this might be kind of weird, but I think it's kind of fascinating that like you're holding something and sort of like you're feeling something like when the emotions when you're reading this and you're learning something and like someone else has invested like hours and hours of their time into this like you pouring over these words and like now I'm doing it then I'll pass it on to someone else and this could be a book that was written like a century ago like I don't know that shit just blows my mind so I read a lot of like classic literature I guess for that regard but
I'm also a fan of the classics, but it's
mm.
usually because I am a glutton for punishment, and like
Wait, what is this word?
yeah, there's something about it where you start reading something and you start realizing where so many things were
Mm.
informed. Like The Shining was funny for me reading that the first time
Oh, dude, I
because
still haven't read it. I've got to. I've got
like
to.
reading it, I was like, all I could see was the Simpsons episode. And
Just use that shin of yours.
yeah, yeah. And there was like I've read last year. My goal was to get through Crime and Punishment by
Mm.
Dostoevsky. This is
Yeah.
like an amazing book, but it's so interesting when
Yeah.
you read something like that and you start seeing other stories and you're like, oh, it's the
Mm.
same. Like you just completely took that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that quote, man. Like, what is it? Good writers borrow, the best ones
Steal.
steal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Like you learn about the people that you love the most, like the
Mm.
music you love the most, and then I think you accidentally figure out who you are while doing that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like we've all got like our own palette, I guess, of different musical influences and because like I remember my mom exposing me to a lot of the 80s stuff like Duran Duran and U2 and Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and that was kind of like my jam when I was a kid and then sort of I discovered the kind of new metal stuff which changed my life and then my stepdad introduced me to a lot of heavier stuff and then later on hip hop like I kind of had this melting pot of all these different styles and nowadays I'm listening to artists like Nothing Nowhere where you've got like trap beats with like technical guitar and like a punk emo chorus and then there'll be like acoustic one takes and just so many different layers and it's yeah, totally that. It's like you find sort of like your style. And I guess like as a creator as well, like I try to put a little flavor nowadays into my music more so because I used to like buy beats like that were made and
Mhm.
then I would like write to that. So I had no real influence over any of it, like not even the melody because obviously I'd need to like if I had like an idea for a hook, I'd need to sing it in key to whatever the beat was. So my only influence was kind of like the lyrics. So nowadays where I'm like producing more, I feel like I can put a bit more of like me into that music side of things.
Opens it up, right? And like
Yeah,
the beat
yeah.
is the foundation of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
So
right. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas it's funny because drums usually are one of the last things.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when
See,
my writing process, like drums are like, oh, what can you do with this whole thing we've already created? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's another thing where I'm backwards, kind of like writing lyrics before having music is my friend Tony, who I produce music with, and we're in a project called Seeing Here.
shout out.
He produces he'll like write chords and melodies first and then do drums last, dependent on like what the song's sounding like and how it sort of travels. Whereas I often like beatbox. Like if I do it, I swear I've got like ADD or something. Like I'll be walking around like work or home, and I'm just like making beats with the way that I'm walking on the tiles, or I'm like tapping my hands, or I'm like like that kind of stuff, like around the house. And so like I often come up with like drum patterns before I come up with melodies or chords or anything. So that also helps me as a rapper because then I know like the tempo of like what I'm gonna be writing to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then I know if I'm gonna be rapping in double time. I know if I'm gonna be in like the straight kind of 4/4 stuff. So it's yeah, I do that kind of backwards as well, I guess. But I guess that's where our two different musical backgrounds where we can kind of like bring that to the table and sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
compare compare
it's-
notes.
Interesting. It's really interesting.
Mm.
Do you find that? So that's one of the things with writing like pop music. I think is I don't know how anyone starts with lyrics and works
Mm.
backwards because for us, I think it has to fit to a chord progression and then the
Right.
melody and stuff like that. Do you think that like 'cause you also write poetry,
Mm.
which I enjoy reading,
Hell yeah.
by the way. So
Yeah. Word.
and like obviously there's like rules and patterns to the poetry. Do you find that because obviously hip hop it's basically very similar in that it's I wouldn't say the same, but there's a
Mm.
similarity to the way. Do you think that it comes together a little easier when you're reading it because you can see the rhyme scheme and you can see like the bars? Whereas if I was just to write, like if you wrote out like a Beatles song and just like looked at the lyrics and didn't know
Yeah.
how it went, you'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's rhyming parts, but I didn't hear the
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You can't picture the flow. So in terms of like when I'm writing the poetry or when I'm writing the lyrics, do you
Yeah, I
mean?
guess does the poetry help inform lyrics?
Right.
Like, is there something in that writing
Um,
that?
for sure. It's kind of been an evolution over the years because I was writing poetry before I was writing lyrics when I was a kid, and I never really like. I don't know where I would have gotten it from. I think I would just like listen to music, but I couldn't sing, so I wrote poetry. Like I didn't read poetry, and that made me want to write poetry. And then like nowadays, when I read poetry, coming from that lyric writing background where things like syllables and meter and flow and rhythm as such like important factors, I can definitely like see that in other works, and then it'll like give me inspiration to try that kind of thing. Like, um, one of my favorite poems, like we were talking about this the other day, one of my favorite poems of all time is "The Raven" by Edgar Allan Poe.
Beautiful.
As cliche as that is,
But yeah,
it's
honestly,
just
that's what we're saying. Like, the thing
it's
about it being cliched is that it is that good.
yeah,
Like,
it's timeless, man. It's such a good like the meter in that poem is probably like the best I've ever seen, and the fact that it's like old as well is incredible. But yeah, recently like I sort of have written poems here and there throughout the years, but for about maybe I don't know 18 months or so now, I've really gotten into it, and I'm writing like almost daily. And what inspired that actually was Halsey's collection of poetry. I think it was called "I Would Leave Me If I Could," and it's just really fascinating because I love her as an artist anyway, and she always had kind of poetic lyrics. And when you read her poetry, you can actually see some lines that she has put in a song.
oh,
I don't
that's
know.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can see sort of like I don't know whether the song or the poem came first, but you can see that there's like that link. So I think with my poetry and my songs, it's a similar thing where like I never write lyrics and go, "Hey, that would make a really good poem." But I've written poems and gone, "Hey, that would make a really good
Yeah,
song."
yeah.
So it's like, and that actually, this is a bit of a segue. That kind of links into something that happened just last night. Um, I was talking to my roommate about, the different music that I've been listening to lately, and how I'm experimenting with what I make as well. And I was like, man, I would like to kind of start a new project where I make like I want to make something different, like something that people haven't heard before, but people could get around. And he's just like sitting there at the table. And he just goes, "What about like spoken word over acoustic guitar?" And I'm like, dude, I could get behind that. I
Yeah,
could do
yeah.
that. It's like I write poetry. I can at least play chords. Like, so that's gonna be my goal for the new year as well as the Amity and the scene here stuff. Is I'm gonna launch something. I'm gonna try and write, see if I can sort of translate my poetry to, because I mean, like I listen to bands like La Dispute and Being as an Ocean, and Bloom, where they're kind of like aggressive vocals, but it's pretty much just poetry
Being as an
over the
ocean
music.
is arguably just poetry to
Yeah.
what sounds like a very like
Mm.
sometimes chill but aggressive
Yeah, it's kind of like poetic
backbeat.
hardcore if that's a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Poetic hardcore. That's a new one to add to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
genre.
And
Yeah.
it's we were talking about like what we would call it, and we came up with the term folk slam because it's like
Oh yeah, that's
slams
funny.
is slam poetry and folks are the acoustics. But I mean, when you think slam, you might think deathcore, so maybe not.
Yeah, no, I was actually gonna ask. I was like, do you have any slam poetry on the cards? You're
Man,
gonna get up and do the
I've
Cynthia. Jesus
yeah,
died for our
I left the light
Cynthias.
on. I've never seen slam poetry done, and I would love to because that sounds like my jam. And I've never considered it either, but um, I think if I could do it to music, like as sort of contradictory as this sounds, I would have something to hide behind.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you're standing up in front of people, and like poetry is a very personal thing, and you've got like a rough crowd, like
Yeah.
I don't know. My anxiety levels will be through the roof. But
I don't know if I could imagine anyone going to a spoken word poetry workshop and
mm,
intentionally trying to screw with people. I feel like everyone who's there
yeah,
is probably
it's
supportive.
it's
Yeah.
such a specific like niche thing. I feel like everyone there would dig it. But yeah, I really want to see more like poetry readings and
They
slam
are
events.
around. I just
Yeah.
I realized it. I was looking for them the other week because for some reason the Facebook algorithm just decided to start throwing me poetry shorts.
Mm.
Possibly because we talked about it. Maybe I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
And I was getting all of
We
these.
put it in the universe.
Yeah, it wasn't even like slam poetry. It was just like them
Mm.
performing it or whatever. Like I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah.
And I started googling, just looking to see if that sort of stuff was around. And yeah, it is. There's a lot of stuff in
That's
Brizzy
cool.
that
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I got to get around it, man, for sure. I think something as well that took me a long time to kind of like I guess recognize was poetry does not have structure. Like there's free form, there's prose, there's so many different like levels to it. And I remember like when I used to write poetry, I'd be like ba ba da ba 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 green, ba ba da ba 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 scene. Like that was
Yeah,
poetry
yeah,
to
yeah.
me. And the fact that you can just like write something and it could just be like a statement. It could be like a sentence, it could be a paragraph, whatever. Um like I just love how fluid it is, and that kind of blew my mind when I made peace with that, and it kind of like opened up all these avenues because like I've got like collections I've like written that one day I would like to have published if anyone here is listening to this that publishes poetry. But it's like some will be like a full page, some will be like 5 words or something, and I just love that freedom, and it's just so expressive. And the fact that you can like it's like a tactile experience. You've got that intention. So like if you're writing on the page, like why do I need to like follow the lines? Why can't I write it upside down? Why can't I write a word here, a word over there? Why can't I have pictures in there? Why can't I leave a sentence unfinished?
Hmm.
Like there's it's just so fascinating. Like I'm probably boring people shitless with this, but it's yeah, I love that shit, man.
I think it's funny because people think poetry is something that's really easy though, and it's something that comes along super like naturally, and
Mm,
then like that you just write like B rhymes with C and
yeah,
that sort
yeah.
of thing. But when you actually start doing it, you realize that there is more to it, and then I think you've discovered by the sounds of it the art of it,
Mm.
not just the physical aspect of it. Like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like when you analyze the structures as well, like how people different, because like there's so many different forms, like as well. Like you've got the the A B. You've got like the limericks and all that kind of thing. Um, obviously haikus and stuff. So it's yeah, the form is really fascinating too.
can you explain what a haiku is to me?
From what I understand, it's a Japanese style poem. There's 3 lines and it's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables.
It's a syllable thing.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Because so like funny you said Reddit before.
right.
Sometimes when you accidentally make a haiku in a comment section, it'll be like, "Oh, you made
Oh,
a
really?
haiku." Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
I always look at it trying to figure out what the pattern
Mm,
is of it, and I can never. I don't know.
that's
I'm
funny.
like, what is that?
That's
So
cool. I did not know that.
yeah, I still don't know what iambic pentameter is. I don't know what
I'm
whatever.
Yeah, I'm still new to Reddit. I gotta
Yeah.
delve deep down one of
Well,
those
don't.
rabbit
It
holes.
goes to
Yeah,
yeah.
doom scroll for a bit.
Um, how did you get onto the AU review stuff? How's the so first of all,
Um,
how did you get into it,
yeah,
and how have the interviews been?
yeah, for sure. So I always have written and I've always talked people's ears off about music. And one day I was like, man, I should probably join those two and make something of it. So I emailed a bunch of like publications, local publications, that sort of focus on music and film and things. And was just like, hey, I'm a writer. I would love to, pitch myself as a potential content contributor. Really love what you guys do. Any chance you guys would have me on to like write some articles? And I emailed probably like 30 or so, and I think maybe 5 came back to me. And anyway, the one that took me on was the Gold Coast based publication, AAA Backstage, run by Chris Lamaro. And pretty much it would just be like um, press releases that they would get from people for an artist's new song or an album. or a video, and you kind of like can put that into like an article or write a feature, and sort of get that up. And it was just like almost copywriting kind of stuff. But then, if I went to a show and I got some photos and I called all the supports, I'd review that and put that up. And that was really cool. It was just kind of like articles I put together, and he sort of get up, and it was really kind of cool to have like start that portfolio. So because I knew that I wanted to kind of like once I had a taste of that, I was like, man, this is what I want to do. I was writing like multiple articles a week, just trying to get my name out there and sort of get better at sort of writing, like structuring a piece. And then AU got back to me. It was probably like 18 months ago. I've been writing for them. There was like a whole sort of application process, and every kind of like 6 months they sort of revisit potential interns, from what I understand. And I was one of the ones they were happy to have on board. Got a kind of induction, and yeah, I became like a casual. It's all just like volunteer kind of freelance stuff. Casual content contributor. So any show I went to, I wanted to review. I'd write an article. They'd put it up. Any artist that dropped a new song that I really liked, I'd write about it. Or any artist that I wanted to interview, I could pitch to the editors and say, hey, I really like these guys. What are the chances we could hook something up? And that was really cool. They would also like give us opportunities as well, like content opportunities. So, if they got someone email them and say, hey, so and so's having a tour soon. Anyone in the crew want to have a chat? They'd put it out to the general team. And if someone, hit it, then it was theirs, kind of thing. So that was really cool. It was like sort of bigger opportunities, I guess, and a bit more um, sort of freedom, but also a bit more responsibility. So like everything's done through WordPress. So um, the contributors can kind of upload themselves rather than
Mhm.
kind of like emailing all their stuff and have someone else do it. And then one of the editors went away for a period of time. So they were asking if anyone wanted to put their hand up to be kind of an assistant editor kind of thing. So I was super keen for that, and they were happy to have me on board. It was a steep learning curve. There were a lot of things that I got wrong that I was getting hounded like almost daily by by the other editors, but it was like super helpful. Like they were very patient, um, and yeah, very good sort of um, I guess I had a lot of guidance as well. I was kind of just relying on like what I had read as like just a reader of like this is what I guess an article would look like. This is
Yep.
like I'd never conducted an interview before. I don't know what I'm meant to ask these people that I listen to regularly. So like a lot of it was fangirling and stuff, and it was like I was just stoked that I could like speak to people that I listen to, or like I could go to a show for free and bring a friend and have a good
That's
time.
cool.
And
That's really
yeah,
cool.
man, the
Yeah.
perks. It's definitely perk based, and it's so sick. And like, man, everyone in like the PR music business is like so lovely and so um like they'll go to some crazy lengths to make sure that you're getting what content you want. And like I've had like publicists mail me cupcakes before. Sly Withers, who I interviewed recently, and reviewed their album. I got an email from their PR recently saying they want to send me a copy of their new album Overgrown on LP as a thank you for all the
That's so
support.
cool, man.
Yeah, man, like they're so lovely, and it's definitely like a field that I can see myself being in long term. So, and yeah, and when that editor who was sort of on holidays came back, they just kept me on as the assistant editor. So it's been fun, man. I've had some really cool opportunities, and it's just really humbling, and they're just kind of getting exponentially bigger. So I think the coolest interview I had was probably City and Color. That was
Yeah, that's
sick.
cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was so humble, man, and it was just really, really fulfilling getting the chance to tell him somewhat in person that Sometimes is one of my favorite albums of all time. And yeah, just little things like that. Like That's What I Reckon was funny. Did a written Q&A with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a laugh and a half, that guy.
Can he just like send you some Domino sauce sign or
yeah,
something?
yeah, that was sick. Man, yeah, I've had some really cool ones, but it's just like because I listen to a lot of local music, like they don't need to be big artists, and I'll still like be super stoked to have a chat with them. So
Have you ever had to write, or have you ever considered writing a negative review? Do you have to? Is there a part?
Funnily enough,
is it positively based, or are you allowed to be like,
I
yeah, okay, these guys didn't hit it for me?
a lot of it's probably biased because like I seek out interviews or shows of artists I like. But there have been a couple where it's like, you get pitched for a feature and you've got to put it together for the PR and you might not really be feeling it, so you're kind of like struggling, like to things to say to kind of like flesh out the word count kind of thing. You just kind of describe the song in the end. But yeah, funnily enough, it was actually a hip hop show. So I got invited to review AJ Tracy, a British rapper, and I want to say the Triffid, I think, not too long ago. And I wasn't too across his stuff. I wasn't too familiar with him as an artist. And it was like a Tuesday night. I had an early start at work. I wasn't really feeling it. Didn't really know the guy. And I was like, oh, look, I'm getting in for free. Like, it's hip hop. Should be good. Went in there and he was like coming off the back of a cold. Didn't have a hype man or a band or a DJ or anything. It was just him on stage. Because it was like that contemporary style of hip hop, the crowd was a bit too wild for my liking. And I don't know. I just wasn't really feeling it, man. Like, I mean, props to the guy for like not missing a beat despite being under the weather and stuff, and sick that he could make the trip down for a tour. But yeah, I think I gave that show 3 stars out of 5, and I don't think I've rated anything lower than 3 stars since I've been with AU Review. Like, I've done live shows, album reviews. Yeah, I think the lowest I've given is a 3, but because I mean, if it's an artist I'm not really feeling, I won't really seek it out. We'll just offer it out to the wider team, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Do you think like because I noticed have squizzed the AU review sort of website. I know you guys do like movies and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Do you think
Theater,
yeah?
food.
Do you think it's easier to give a lower review to things that have faceless corporations behind them as opposed to you are in the room watching the person do their job and there's a part of you that has a sympathy maybe to them.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
saying that you're intentionally
No,
giving them high
no.
scores or anything, but like there is that thing where you're like, oh,
Mm.
I understand how hard this is to do and what
Yeah.
he did. Whereas with a movie, it's like, Christopher Nolan doesn't
Yeah,
care if
that's
I thought Tenet sucked.
that's right. That's right. That's a great question. Yeah, look, Peter, the guy that does a lot of our film reviews, he's ruthless sometimes.
They
Like,
always are, man.
he'll
Yeah.
give like 2 stars to something, but he's really good. He'll be like really kind of like he can be objective with it. He'll have like a full 1,000-word count piece on it and give it like 2 stars. Like
Yeah.
he does consider like everything. But yeah, like there's been times I guess I've been I remember one of the most awkward interviews I've done was Kurt from The Butterfly Effect. And that was, I think that might have actually been the first interview I ever did, and then Middle Kids was second. And that was a phone call, that one. And it was my first interview, so I didn't really know like what kind of things to ask or
Mhm.
what to expect even. And like he probably didn't know it was my first thing. And I remember I was like, oh man, the music video is so cool. Like, I love that you did this and this. And there's silence, and then he just goes, "Is that sincere?" And I was like, "Yeah, man. Like, it was a cool video. Like, I guess because they kind of like they feel like they're kind of out of it now because they were big, like mid 2000s. So I guess they've got kind of that kind of they must feel like people have kind of forgotten about them, kind of thing. But and now I remember I was like, oh, so at the end I was like, so what's the future looking like, for the Butterfly Effect? What can we expect to see, in the coming months? And he's like, well, we're a band and we make music, so probably new music. And I was like, okay, cool.
Ooh.
And then anyway, we just like ended up talking about the album and stuff. But I mean, he was a lovely dude. Like in the end, he took the time. And I think it was just rough for me. I probably made it a really awkward interview. But yeah, in terms of like negative reviews, not really, man. Like I'll be honest, but the fact that I like a lot of music is probably like working to their favor.
Yeah, it helps. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
like, they're never gonna send you to a gig that you're like, oh my god,
That's
please,
right.
for love of God, no.
That's right.
So-
Yeah, it's not like they're gonna send me to the Tamworth Country
Now,
Festival or something.
is there any cool ones you've got coming up that you know of?
Towards the end of this year, everyone I listen to that hasn't been able to tour over the pandemic has announced Australia tours. So my bank account is feeling it. But yeah, so it's been cool to see a lot of like local artists when like the music business was picking up again in the aftermath of the pandemic. But yeah, like a lot of big names like Hailstorm, Tiny Moving Parts, Nothing Nowhere, Lexus on Fire, you know, Being as an Ocean actually are coming, and
Awesome.
they're supported by like Stepson, Bloom, and The Comfort. So it's a stacked lineup. But yeah, a few things, man. Hopefully, just onwards and upwards.
Easy as, man. Well, so the gigs are looking up.
Yeah.
From a personal place. You got heaps of reviews and stuff, I'm sure, lined up as well.
Yeah. Look, I used to run this like YouTube channel where I'd film myself in my bedroom reviewing albums, and looking back, it was kind of awful. So I'm gonna stick to the written word. But yeah, like
Go looking for that.
Yeah, local injection.
Yeah.
But yeah, any albums that drop, man, by an artist I like, I'll generally like put my hand up to try and review it, and if we get the press kit for it, then for sure. So, what have we got coming out? I can't think of anything that's coming out soon because they try to keep things quiet over the Christmas period. But the Comfort, a Brisbane punk band, dropped a record last month, and I gave it 5 out of 5, and it's the first album I've given full stars. Check it out. It's called Experience Everything, Live and Die, and it is a journey, man. Like it's so expansive, and it's only a sophomore record, and yeah, it's some like insightful shit. It's so good, and I met those guys at a show, and they're just so humble, and yeah, check out the
Sure.
Comfort.
Sweet, man. Yeah, I'll check it out. And where can we find your stuff, and what can we find?
Yeah, man. So I think on my socials, like on Facebook and Instagram, I've got like a link tree where you can find everything. But amityrapper.bandcamp.com, you can find my music and some merch. Facebook.com/AmityRapper, Amity Villain on Instagram, and yeah, I'm on Spotify and YouTube, and yeah, got shirts for sale online. Other than that, man, hopefully be gigging in the new year, and you can catch me at some bars, and I'll be running a merch desk, and hopefully get some friends up, and
Yep.
yeah,
Come and invade your space while you're trying to think of a review while you're at it too. So
yeah,
there you go.
man, no, it'd be good. Yeah,
No.
we'll have to catch up. We'll catch up.
100%,
Yeah,
man. Well,
for
thanks
sure.
for coming along, by the way.
Thank you so much. This has been sick.
No, it's
Appreciate
great.
it.
It's been easy. You've made this super
Oh,
easy
good,
for me.
good.
So
Yeah,
now
I tend
know
to
how you feel.
waffle when I talk about music, so hopefully that made things go smoothly.
No, now I know how you feel as an interviewer. So I
Right.
got to interview the interviewer, so that's good. Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks, man.
No, thank you, man. Appreciate it very much.
Too easy.
Hell yeah.